Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
And Rachel,
2 certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only 2 best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go.
Okay, before we even just get started, I just want to be very clear about something. We are in the middle of a special, I'm dancing, short course promotion. They can't see that on the podcast. We're on YouTube right now. If you would rather go watch us on video, you can go to YouTube. Just a reminder, this is the monthly time that we do that. That's not the most important point to make, though. Right now, we're doing a promotion on our intro course, the Passion Profile short course, and we're doing something rather insane.
Well, in addition to giving you some money off,
$50 off with the code MAY until this Tuesday, the 21st. We're also doing something we've never done before, and very likely we'll never do again. And I don't say that to be like shocking
or salesy.
I just am saying that because we decided, well, we were going to give the first 10 people who decided to buy the course for a free call.
Coaching call
with one of us, which everyone always loves and is hype about. Did I use that correctly? Is that even a thing anymore? But it wasn't super, it's not super fair depending on where your time zone is.
And when we send out the email and how quickly you get to check your email or if you're at work.
It's just kind of hard. So here's what we're doing. I might regret this. I might rue the day I decided to do this.
I think we might, but it's okay.
But
we're going to give it a shot.
We've decided to give everyone who buys the short course in this promotion window, which lasts again until this coming Tuesday, the 21st, a free hour-long coaching call with one of us.
Usually we give 30-minute calls to the first 10 people, if anything.
Yeah. So here's what I'm going to say. It would be insane if you're new to Clarity on Fire and you have no idea what you're doing, if you're stuck, if you're overwhelmed, you don't know how to figure out your career direction. It would be insane of you to not do this because these 2 things together are like practically not, it's basically like you're getting a free course. Or
right. This is about as much as a individual coaching call would cost anyway.
Right.
And we don't offer individual coaching calls.
No, we don't do this.
You can't get that. You can't just purchase that in any other way.
No. So that'd be kind of silly of you not to take advantage of it is what I'm saying. So
I want to also let you know that the free coaching call that you will get if you sign up for this course.
This is important.
We will schedule that with you after you have completed the course.
Yeah.
And that's for your benefit.
You ain't getting jack until you do the work.
That's for your benefit because a lot of what you probably want to talk to us about we'll get into in the course, and the course is going to have you thinking about things in a new way, and you'll probably have some questions, and you'll want some support in applying what you learned to your life and your career. So instead of us coaching you and then saying, well, if you go and do the course, you'll get the answer to what you're asking. Do the course first, and then we will talk to you about what you learn from that. So this really benefits you, and it also helps us stagger these out a little bit.
Yeah.
So that
we're going to space them out
overwhelmed. It's a win-win.
Yeah, we'll space them out over the course of weeks and even months, depending on when you guys finish it and when you're available and when we're available. Either way, it'll work out. I don't expect 800 people to sign up. That's why I am confident that we can actually deliver on.
And if 800 people do sign up, then we are allowed to call it.
We'll call it at some point if it really gets out of hand. I don't think it will. I think we can handle it, or else I wouldn't be promising it in the first place. It's not super in my integrity to do something like that unless I can follow through on it.
Yeah.
quick word about who's the right person to do this course. Because I don't want you to just sign up for this course if you just want a free coaching call. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Don't do that. You can go to the Work With Us tab, first of all. ClarityOnFire.com, go to the Work With Us tab.
There's also a link in this episode description that will take you right to the page we're talking about.
Yeah, so you can read about it there just to get clear. But this is based on our passion profile quiz. So if you took the quiz and you really resonated with your result and you're thinking, how do I put this into action? This is the place to start. This is the ideal place to start if you're new to Clarity on Fire at all and don't know where to get started with figuring out your career direction and you're feeling stuck. This is the ideal place to start because it helps you get really clear on what the intersection is between your career and your passion and how those two things are meant to be combined so that you can rule out a bunch of options you're considering, a bunch of directions you're considering that you don't need to be considering anymore, and help you get a lot more refined and clear about the direction you do need to be moving in so that what comes next eventually, and this is something we do in our other course, the PPVE, it's what we do in one-on-one coaching, we then get clear on what you're actually supposed to be doing, what your passion actually is. But answering that question isn't even possible, in our opinion, until you figure out how and your overall direction. So this helps you figure out your overall direction.
I will say also, some of you have been listening to us for a long time or reading our blogs for a long time. You might not actually be new to Clarity on Fire, but you might not have worked with us in any kind of a capacity before. And this is one of the coolest ways that you could dip your toe into actually working with us because not only do you get our intro level course, which is the perfect starting place, but you get to talk to one of us individually. So we want to invite you, even if you're not brand new, but if you've just been around for a little while and you are like, I've been wanting to work with these girls, but I just don't know what to start with. This is what to start with.
Okay. So if you need more, go to the link in the description. And you can, if you have questions, you're also welcome to email us at contact@clarityonfire.com and we can answer questions you have there too. I mean, here's the thing. If you email me though, and you ask me a question that you could have found on our website, I'm not going to want to answer that. So you have to have actually done the work first before you ask follow-up questions.
We do answer a lot of your potential questions on that page we mentioned.
Kristen and I really respect intellectual pursuit, you know? Okay,
and
so...
detective work?
Sure, well, just being thorough and respecting other people's time by not sending them dumbass questions. Not accusing, but like, 98%
don't make them afraid of reaching out to us. You can reach out to us.
Whatever. If they're here and they're still listening to this, they're not that afraid. Okay, I would have scared them off by now. Okay, so that was that. We'll remind you again at the end. Not that you need a reminder, but we will be back to remind you.
You might get so wrapped up in the topic at hand that you do need a reminder. So
I forgot to put earrings in for this.
Oh, well, that's okay.
That's fine. I mean, it doesn't detract, I don't think. Oh my god, the earrings. Without it, she would be such a hag if she just put those earrings on.
The content is so much worse when you're not wearing earrings.
Ah! Okay, well, that's, again, another reminder that we do these on YouTube as well as on the podcast. Only once a month do we actually do any work, as in put effort into our appearance to appear in front of you on YouTube.
Yeah. So if you like the idea of watching words come out of our mouth instead of just hearing words come out of your...
So exciting!
It's not like we put together a whole big crazy video. It's just us talking. But if you like it, come watch us on YouTube.
Sure. Okay. Here's what we're here to talk about today. For a reminder, and for those of you who are new, this is a side chat. What is the point of a side chat? Well, it's a topic that we pick ahead of time. We have very little planning, and we just sit down and we talk it out. And the point, hopefully, is that you like the fact that it isn't necessarily an organized presentation of facts, that it's more of a conversation around something that we think is really important and timely, and that's been coming up a lot lately. And this is all of those things, okay? So...
And it's relevant to every single one of us.
Literally.
So we know that
yes.
If you're listening, you will find something that makes you say, ooh, that's me in this one.
You can't have escaped what we're going to talk about.
Nope.
It would be impossible. Not possible if you are a human. Okay. I love things that are so universal that literally no one can say that they don't have this problem. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is going to be really relevant to you, especially, A, if you're human. 2, oh no, I just did that thing that they did in Home Alone, like A and B and 2 and then Biff or whatever. Anyway, okay, I'm sorry. 1 or 2. 1, you're human. 2, it's going to be relevant if you have a block that you keep bumping up against. Something that you just can't get over. No matter how hard you try or how many times you've tried to come at it from different angles, you still find yourself struggling with this.
And we know that's true about all of you.
We all have
well.
a thing, okay? Now, I'm not saying that always 100% of the time what we're going to get into is the reason that you have this block, but I'm saying what we're getting into is the reason you have a lot of your most stubborn old blocks.
And this is certainly something that you should be asking about. Even if the answer turns out to be no, the likelihood is that there is a decent chance it's coming from this. And so you should at least be asking those questions when you have those recurrent blocks or those things that you just keep hitting up against and you don't know why it's so hard for you. This is a good place to start digging into that and seeing what's underneath of that.
It's really, in my opinion, the first place we should all be starting because it's the oldest place. And okay, there's actually 2 ways you could go about this. You could start with the oldest place and just like basically atomic bomb the crap out of your beliefs because that's what this is. It's going for sort of the nucleus of where some of your most stubborn blocks came from. But sometimes you can't get there first. Sometimes you have to start on the outside and peel away the layers until you get to this. Either way, doesn't matter how you get here.
You're going to get to the core eventually anyway.
One way or another, you're going to get to the core. And this is something that we do both in coaching. We do it a lot more in therapy. We'll talk more about that at the end. But it's important. It's important for us to recognize this regardless of how we end up trying to heal it. We first have to know that it's happening and where it's coming from. Okay. So I'm going to tell you what the it is in a second. But I want to dial it back. I'm actually making a rewind motion with my hands right now. I want to dial it back to childhood. Because that's what we're talking about. Spoiler alert. We're talking about your inner wounded child. Don't turn off this video because I just said that. I promise. This is going to make sense and it's going to hopefully make some light bulb moments go off. Okay.
If they stuck with us through some of our other woo-woo topics, I think they can.
And all the times I've sort of called people dumbasses or implied that they might be too lazy to do any Googling. I mean, I'm not saying that about 98.9% of you, okay? I'm saying that about like what I don't do math. Whatever the difference is between 100 and 98.9. Is that 1.1?
1.1.
Okay.
That was pretty easy math.
Whatever. Okay. I'm sorry, this is already off the rails. I want you to dial it back to childhood. And I want you to think about how a little brain gets molded. How does a person become the person that they are? They get molded by the people who raise them.
You don't grow up in isolation.
No.
What you learn from the people around you.
And the most important people who determine how your brain gets wired, I'm not even saying not just the beliefs you inherit, but literally how your brain gets chemically and electrically wired.
That get formed because of the people who raised you. You spend the most time with them. You spend your most formative years when you're first learning what is it like to be a human on this earth with them. Yes. So it only makes sense. This is just a logical conclusion that we're coming to here, that obviously those are the people who are going to impact you and your beliefs and your brain wiring more than anyone else on the planet.
Yes. Your parents. We're going to say parents for most of this time. Obviously, not everyone was raised by their biological mother and their biological father, but parents can mean grandparents. It can mean being raised by an aunt and an uncle.
Whoever, adopted parents,
right?
A sibling.
Whoever raised you. And honestly, it's not just your parents. Those just tend to be the most formative people. But yes, if you had an older sibling who was very involved in you being raised, or a grandparent who was really important, of course, that person's input has a lot to do with how you were wired as well. Okay.
I fancy myself very influential in my younger brother's life.
I fancy myself influential in his life too, because he's known me since he was 5 years old.
He was 14 years younger than me, so I was kind of like a pseudo-parent. But even still, I did not raise him.
No,
my parents still had the biggest effect, just like all of us.
Right. Okay. So your parents, the people who raised you, are the people who determine your blueprint for almost everything. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That can be a really positive thing in a lot of ways. But here, I'm going to focus in this conversation most on what I think is the crux of what a lot of people are struggling with, that they inherited from their parental blueprint, okay? Your parents teach you, maybe more than anything, like literally this is more important than maybe anything else that they can teach or model, is how you go about receiving and giving love and belonging and acceptance. They teach you a lot of things about money. They teach you a lot of things about other kinds of really important things we struggle with. But I want to focus on those things because those are the things that tend to hurt people the most. Those are the deepest worthiness wounds that people tend to be operating from.
It's because those are the things that make you have a concept of who you are and what's important to you and your own worth as a human. So
your parents teach you how to give and receive love, belonging, and acceptance two ways. Just going to break it down really easy for you. One, directly, just with the words and the actual things that they are saying to you, positive and negative, and indirectly with their behavior, with the way they model, the way they do life. And you just pick up on it. Those mirror neurons picking up on it.
Sometimes those things align. Sometimes what they say to you is also aligned with how they live their lives and how they communicate with other people and their behavior. Sometimes that is very different. So they might be one of those parents who takes the approach, do what I say, not what I do. And that can have a different kind of effect on a child if they're seeing a discrepancy there.
So one example of how a parent goes about actually giving you direct feedback is just how many of us have a parent or parents who were very, very focused on hard work. Like, hard work is the way to win over people. It's the way to be a success in the world. You can't get anything without working hard. Most of us would agree with that. And most of us probably don't think that's inherently a bad thing. And it's not. Because when a parent is telling you something, they're very likely not trying to make your life worse. Right. They're trying to impart wisdom or experience onto you to help you avoid pain and to help you avoid struggles. But what can often happen, especially if you're young, when you hear certain messages, is that you take it in and you make it mean something about who you are as a person. So you're like, okay, my parents really value hard work. So in order to be liked and loved and accepted and to belong with these people who really care about me and whose survival, my survival depends on these people, the way that I earn their praise and approval, their acceptance, their belonging, their love is by doing what they say, working really hard.
Another one that I hear from so many of my clients, I know this is not an across-the-board thing, but a lot of you will relate to this, is my parents have a very high emphasis on stability and predictability. And so this fear comes in if I do something that might be a little bit risky or a little bit untraditional or that they won't fully understand because it's not in the standard model, then what if I lose their love, acceptance, and appreciation or attention?
So that's one way, is directly through the words and the maxims and the values that they espouse and the things that they tell you. Also, let's be clear, not everyone, and I've coached a lot of people who did not have good parents, whose parents weren't even trying very hard, or whose parents were so damaged themselves that they weren't even capable of trying to be a good parent.
Or they were so in survival mode that they weren't able to give it even if they really wanted to because they weren't present.
So in those cases, like, it's possible that you had a bad parent and that parent actually said things to you that was reprehensible, like you're fat and you're never gonna be, no one's ever gonna love you if you look like that.
You're not good enough or you're not very smart.
Yeah, you're not as smart as your sister. Mm-hmm. She's kind of the disappointment child. I've had people whose parents say things like that to them or about them, and that's a huge wound. Huge wound. So, okay, one.
Especially to a small developing mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's
because as an adult,
it's a crime
as
to say
an
that
adult,
to a kid.
It can be. It's still very wounding, but as an adult, you have a little bit of separation. When you're a kid, you really don't. So it's really easy to take that on and then carry it with you potentially for the rest of your life.
Well, and you need these people to like and accept you and love you because your survival depends on them. And so it's imperative that you get that from them. And if they make you feel on purpose or inadvertently even that you have to work for their love and attention and approval, you will work for it the rest of your life. That's where we're going with this. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. So again, directly and indirectly. So indirectly, here's an example of someone I used to work with, or one of my clients, is the child of a single mother who worked really, really hard, as single moms have to do. I mean, her mom did not have a choice. And her mom, and I'm sure her mom inherited this from her parents and on it goes, but her mom's, the way that her mom showed up in the world, she wasn't necessarily preaching this model. She was just living this model, was to be everything for everyone. Always give back.
This is a common one, yes.
Always like martyr yourself for other people, basically. Always take care of other people, put other people before yourself. And so my client saw that her mom did this. So she's picking up on, well, this is how my mom is modeling. So in order to be accepted by her, I need to act like her. But it goes even deeper than that, I think, which is that she saw how hard her mom worked. And so she got the message that I need to not bother my mom at all. I need I don't want to be one more burden in an already burdensome life. So I should never rock the boat. I should never speak up. I should never complain because her life is so hard. I don't want to make her life harder. So her mom was also inadvertently modeling how my client should react and behave based on how her mother was reacting and behaving to life. Right? I don't want to make my mom's life harder, so I'm just not going to be a burden. And I'm not and like that's how my mom will know that I love her, is I'm not making her life harder. So, before we go on to our next point, I want to just stop and say, this is not about blaming the people who raised you. This is not about pointing fingers and being like, you messed me up. Because here's the thing, you should have empathy for everyone. And you should especially have empathy for the people who raised you, because you might have insight into the blueprints that they downloaded from their parents and the people who raised them. You understand how people get the messages they got. And most people are just doing the best they can with what they got. And sometimes it's just gonna screw us over. That's the, no parent is perfect. No person is perfect.
If you are looking at your relationship with them and saying they instilled this belief within me or this worldview within me, then they didn't do that in isolation. You have to think, someone instilled that in them. Someone instilled that in their guardians. So This is a generational thing. And in a way, it can allow you to, I'm not saying that you have to accept bad behavior.
No.
I'm not saying that you even have to forgive that necessarily.
Yeah.
But you can understand and maybe have a little bit of empathy for where that might have come from. And I 100% agree with you that everyone is doing the best they can with what they have. If they had a really poor model, then they don't have a lot to work with. They never got a really good model to be able to instill in you. They don't want to be a bad parent. Nobody wants to royally screw over their children, but they just might not know what to do.
And ultimately, this conversation is going to be about how you take responsibility for yourself, so that
you
you're
can
not
break the pattern.
Right, so that you break the pattern, and you're not blaming anyone else for the lot in life that you received or that they received. That's not what this is about.
And here's the thing: you can break the pattern, and you're still going to mess up your kids.
Yeah, this is a really important point. We've had clients who have what they think are perfect parents.
And I would even say what society would agree
is a perfect parent.
Perfect parents.
And they still have fears. They still have struggles. In fact, think about it like this. If you have a dad who you just adore, you think he could literally do no wrong, you're going to have a really hard time dating if you're attracted to men because you might have this model of this is the perfect man and no one can ever live up to him. That's actually a problem, right? To put someone on a pedestal. So it's funny. It's like you can make mistakes as a parent, or you can be the most perfect parent ever. Either way, your kids are going to have issues.
You could be the most perfect parent who is completely loving and completely supportive and a good listener and a best friend and a parent combination, all the things that we would think we would want. And that could actually also ill prepare them for life, because life is not a perfect world. So if you're living in this perfect bubble with your family and then you got into the world, you're going to be like, why does
everyone
being
suck?
mean to me, and why am I failing sometimes, and why is there not always a security net to catch me? So you're going to mess your kids up too if you plan to have kids, if you already have kids. That's the cycle of humanity, but you can try to do your best, which might be a little bit more self-aware than your parents. That's all we can hope. Let's just get a little bit more self-aware each stage down the line, and that's what we're hoping for here.
That's fine.
Not perfection.
Yeah, okay. All right. We had to make that caveat just for all the people who, are like, oh my God, I'm a parent and I'm messing up their kid, or our kid. No, you're not. Yes, you are, but it's not a problem. Because it is what it is. We all struggle with this. Okay, so transitioning from that point, okay. Because your parents are so integral in teaching you and modeling to you how to go about giving and receiving love and acceptance and belonging, you will translate that to literally almost everyone else you interact with. I promise you, even people you don't think you're doing it with, even people you think, I don't need them to like me or love me or accept me. And we're going to give you some examples to make it very clear that we all do this. So in that example I gave a minute ago about my client with the single mom, one of her problems, this should not come as a surprise to any of us, is that she was very much plagued by overworking. Just staying late and feeling guilty about leaving on time, feeling like she has to be checking her email at 9:00 at night because someone might need something from her. And this seems kind of obvious. Well, of course she's doing it because this is the model she received about how you go about receiving affection and praise and being accepted into the group, right?
And being a good person is being a hardworking person.
Right. Being a good person is giving everything to everyone and never complaining and never asking for anything else. And so we're going to go into how we address this in a minute, but I just want to point out that a lot of the time what bad coaches would do, I don't even think a therapist would address this because this isn't a therapist territory, but what a bad coach would certainly do is they would try to help that person, they would try to help my client hack their day. Okay, so how can you get more time if you're feeling really overwhelmed? Or how can you, speak up in that meeting even though this person is terrified and they've never spoken up in their life? They would try to sort of manipulate the circumstance from the outside without going back long enough and deep enough to the point of where did they get this model? Why do they think that this is necessary? Or why are they so compelled to show up this way?
What is the belief system that is creating this situation in the first place? And then, of course, where did it come from? But really, we need to identify the belief, and then we can figure out what to do to solve that. But if you're just solving it on the outside, you're not actually changing this in a sustainable long-term way. Because this came from a deep-seated thing a long time ago.
Well, and this is why it's so compulsive. This is why people compulsively, we're going to talk, I think you have some examples about this. Why can people compulsively date the same type of person? Why they compulsively are people-pleasing? Because, honestly, that's kind of what an addiction is, right? It's a compulsion that you can't totally control, and that it's a void you're constantly trying to refill. That is what happens when you are constantly trying to get the love and the acceptance and the belonging that you felt you couldn't ever get enough of when you were a kid. Is that you will then go out in the world and you will look for it everywhere and you will try to constantly fill it up and fill it up and fill it up. And it's not possible to fill it up because if it's a wound that you haven't actually healed, it's just a permanent gaping thing that you're going to be constantly throwing all of your relationships into, and all of your interactions are going to be sucked into this black hole. And it's never going to get filled. That's what happens when you have a core worthiness, like acceptance, belonging, love wound.
Because it can't be filled by anything external.
It can't be filled by anything. Well, it can't be filled by anyone other than the people whose love and acceptance and belonging you're actually trying to get.
And you may never get it, so you might have to give it to yourself.
Because a lot of those people are never going to change. right?
Right.
So let's give some more examples.
So I have a client that I'm thinking of who her mother and father had a very tumultuous divorce pretty early in her life. And her mom was constantly complaining about her dad and about men in general. And her mom was bitter and upset and would say men are lazy or men are all these different criticisms, and told her things like you should be independent and you don't need to rely on a man, and would also say things like you deserve a great relationship, which was really weird.
Right.
So naturally my client was having her own feelings and complaints and disbeliefs in the goodness of men. And because of that, she was attracting a lot of not so great, not very respectful men into her life, which makes perfect sense. If you adopted a worldview from your mom that men cannot be trusted and men are all of these terrible things, then why would you go out into the world and want to have a relationship
You would just
with
be like,
a man?
I ain't touching that.
So she on some level did want that, because a lot of us really do want partnership, but she wasn't able to get that in a healthy way because of these deep-seated beliefs that weren't even hers, that she just took on from that parental figure who, again, her mother was not trying to mess up all of her future relationships.
No, she
Her
actually
mother
was trying to
be protective.
do the opposite.
Right.
Which is ironic, right?
Right. And so that was a pattern that we had to look at and say, where did all of this stuff about how men are, where did that even come from? And when she recognized, that's not mine. I just heard that so much that I internalized it, but I actually know a lot of really fantastic men out there. And it's my job now to look for those good qualities instead of to expect the bad qualities, because whatever you look for in the world, you're going to find evidence of that. So the beliefs that you got from your parents or from the people who raised you are going to shape your worldview in such a way that you will attract exactly what you expect to attract. So when she decided, I think there are actually a lot of great men out there, and she decided to look more for them, she started to attract a different type of partner into her life. But that really did require examining, where did this come from in the first place. I'm also thinking, now that I'm on relationship topics, I'm thinking of another example of this, which was a client who her parents stayed together, but they had a very tumultuous relationship, I guess, for lack of a better term. They were arguing all the time, and it just felt very fraught in her household very often. And so because of that, her reaction was, I don't want that, or I think I don't want that. So I'm going to find a really safe, stable relationship with a very safe man. And she would always get bored with those types of men, because in her mind, her model of a relationship was one where there was a lot of emotion and a lot of chaos, and it was very tumultuous, and it was also very intense. And so she wanted stability, but she didn't actually believe that that's what a relationship was supposed to be.
Well, can I add something to that? Mm-hmm. I think that there's probably a good example there of the model to her of what a relationship is something that is chaotic and something that is unstable. But if her dad was also a chaotic, kind of unstable or emotionally unavailable type of person, if she's constantly, it's like, you got to think back, she's a kid who's constantly trying to get love and affection, because you can't help but try to get love and affection from your parents. It's hardwired into you. So if she didn't feel like she was getting constant and consistent love and affection and praise and validation and acceptance from her dad, guess what she's going to do? She's going to look for that in men just like him over and over and over again. That's what happens, right? Is we're trying to get the love and the acceptance and the validation and the worthiness that we didn't feel that those people were able to give us. We inadvertently attract people that are like almost carbon copies of them in some way to try to heal the wound that we couldn't heal with them.
Or in her case, she was attracting men who were different, but because of that, she wasn't satisfied, because it wasn't attention from the right kind of person who actually made her feel like
right kind of
she was getting it from her dad.
Quote unquote, right kind of person.
Which is why she would get bored so quickly and move on.
Yeah. So you see this, right? Like you guys are all thinking of someone, even just in the relationships category, right? Where they're either literally trying to get the love and the affection and the belonging from someone who's a carbon copy of who they couldn't get it from when they were a kid, or they're swinging to the opposite extreme and trying to sort of do the exact opposite of what they experienced. And that's probably not working for them either. Okay? Because that's what happens when we live in reaction to our wounds. It just doesn't work. Okay. Another example I'm thinking of is one of my clients who, and this will be very familiar to those of you who had addict parents. And I've coached quite a lot of people who've had addiction in one or both of their parents. Both of her parents were addicts. Her dad was not very present. Her mom was, but as with, any addict, erratic behavior, violence, can't predict their behavior, really passive aggressive. So she, at a very young age, had to become an adult. Like, she's 13 and she's cooking dinner and she's taking care of her younger sibling. And she learned, just by virtue of being in that circumstance, that the way that I am most often accepted, or at least the way that I avoid all of the negative attention from this parent, is if I am completely pleasing, if I'm always doing things for other people, if I'm always being responsible and I'm always saying yes and just taking on the burden of responsibility. Like, I have to just be the adult in the room all the time. And so, of course, how is this showing up for her? She's completely and utterly overwhelmed at her job. And she constantly finds herself saying yes to things she doesn't want to say yes to. And she's just totally drowning in work. Because, again, her idea of how to get love and acceptance is to just say yes and to just take it on and take more on and just be the most responsible person that you can. And then maybe this person will pay attention to me. Really heartbreaking. Yeah. Right? So, how do we actually go about addressing this? Right? We've given you some examples of how it shows up. I think we've proven by now that I think all of us have this experience in some way or another. Big ways, small ways, it's showing up. Okay, first, I want you to think about the scenario in which you constantly find yourself bumping up against something, right? Like the block that you find yourself unable to get over, or the pattern that keeps repeating itself and that you can't figure out why it's repeating itself. And I want you to pause. It's a really great question, okay? I want you to ask, what does this remind me of from my past? And I'm not talking about 5 years ago past. I'm talking about when I was a kid, when I was an adolescent. What does this remind me of? Or who does this remind me of?
Often that's a good question.
Yeah, what or who does this scenario remind me of?
Many people that you attract into your life are going to have the qualities of the people because that's familiar to you.
What dynamic does this remind me of? You're always going to be able to come up with an answer to that. In my client who I just mentioned, the one with an alcoholic mother, the situation it reminds me of, I'm thinking about being 13 and having to come home and cook dinner, for my sibling. Like, the burden of that, the overwhelming responsibility of trying to be a kid and get good grades and do sports and also take care of my sibling and take care of, basically be a parent to my parent because they were so incapable of being a parent to me. That is how, that same level of overwhelm. That is how I feel at work. I feel the exact same way. That is what that reminds me of. So, what does it remind me of? Okay. And we're not going to get into healing this on the deepest level because if
we can't in this,
we're not going to do that. And this is something that deserves months and months of effort and work and attention. Okay. We're just giving you we want you to be able to recognize this so that you can then go do something about it. That's what's really important. Okay. But I do want to help you at least learn how to dance with this and navigate this a little bit. So first, ask yourself, what does this remind me of? Very likely it's going to be some dynamic from your past, some family dynamic, some parental dynamic. I think it's important, and I'm not saying this is a step-by-step thing. I'm saying this is an additional thing that you can ask yourself. I think it's really important, and I'm just having this idea now, so I'm sorry if it's not super articulate. But what did I learn inadvertently or maybe on purpose from my parents about the best way to go about receiving love and attention and acceptance and belonging and respect? Like, how did you get that from them?
For some of you, you got that by being really, really good, or you thought you could get it by being really, really good.
Yeah.
For some of
passive or quiet or getting really good grades, like being the best at something.
And getting that kind of praise.
Yeah.
And some of you got that from acting out and being rebellious and going against, breaking the rules and going against the grain. And maybe it wasn't the best kind of attention, but maybe it was the best, it was the most attention you could get. And so that was your way of getting it, because being good went unnoticed.
Yeah.
And so you might be a bit of a rebel at heart, and you might think that's just who you are, but that might have just come from, that was the only way I knew how to get attention.
Yeah. Another question related to that I think is also really important to ask is, what do I know about how the people who raised me, how my parents learned to get love and attention and respect and affection? Because if you can understand how they had to show up or how they had to be in order to get those things as kids, it can explain a lot about what they passed on to you. And you don't have to go back generations, though honestly you could, and you could kind of see the inception of like how this doesn't start anywhere, right? It's just like, it keeps on getting passed down and passed down. And I think it can help you be a little bit more empathetic to, I mean, like, my client's alcoholic mom, there's no way she was just born an alcoholic, right? You know, she had, addiction in her family. She clearly had a really unstable model that she grew up with. And so she became addicted, and that was her way of coping with life. And it's not excusing her inability to be a good parent. It's just, it explains it. And explaining it can go a long way to you empathizing with it, and also just understanding the patterns you inherited.
I think it can be helpful sometimes too, if you're not always going to be able to do this, but if you can, it might shine a lot of awareness onto your family generational beliefs that have been passed down. If you can go back and say, what are some of the major events that my ancestors went through? So if I had ancestors who went through the Great Depression, there might have been a whole belief system that was taken on during that life experience that has gotten passed on, even though our economic situation is very different now. Or did I have parents or grandparents or great-grandparents who were immigrants who came over from a country that was in war? And how did that impact what family belief systems have gotten passed down? So you might be very removed from one of the events that might have happened to create some of these things in the first place, and yet they're still lingering, in which case it's easier to disconnect and say, oh, well, no wonder. Of course, that's why my family believes what it believes.
Yeah.
But I am not in that situation anymore, and this is not relevant to my current life experience. It's easier to let it go, and it's also easier to have compassion.
Yeah. So, okay. Now we get to the real meat of the matter. Like, how we get past the most stubborn blocks that will not budge, the patterns that keep repeating themselves. This is it. You have to learn how to reparent yourself. This is the work of a lot of therapy, can be the work of a lot of coaching too, but this is where you take responsibility for going back and being the parent that the kid within you never got to have, or you get to retell the story in a way that you get to, in a way that's more empowering. So for example, with my client who has a mother who was an alcoholic, after she told me that, it reminds me of when I was 13 and I had to make dinner for my sibling and I was so overly responsible for everything. I said, that's the person who's doing your job right now. It's not you. The panicked inner 13-year-old is the one who's showing up at work every day. Because that's what happens when you get wounded, is you often like freeze in that age where the wound happened around that issue, and you just stay that small person who's scared and feels completely out of control and feels like they have no idea what they're doing. Which is why often you feel so out of control and you feel so out of your depths around your core wounds. It's because it's not a grown-up person. It's not a 40-something woman, as my client is, showing up at work. It's a 13-year-old girl showing up and trying to do an adult's job. And that's completely overwhelming. So what I said is I want you to imagine that you, adult you, is sitting with, next to, beside, whatever, this 13-year-old girl, and you are helping her work through her calendar. You're going to sit there and you're going to tell her, we're allowed to say no to this. We're allowed to take this off the calendar. I know it sounds silly, but to go back and to be the good parent, the one who said, let me help you take this off your plate. That's what a good parent is supposed to have done for her, right? Is to make her feel like you're allowed to be a kid. This is not your job. You do not have to take care of everyone. You do not have to cook dinner for everyone. You're 13. You should be able to enjoy your life. Go back and be that parent to yourself. Help her remove things from her plate, because that is what a really good mom would do in that scenario.
I'm thinking also of the client I described earlier whose parents had that really terrible divorce, and her mom was constantly sharing criticisms of men in general. The way that she could have gone back and said, and reparented herself in that moment, would be to say, I want you to know that your father and I love you very much. It didn't work out between us. It has nothing to do with you. You have every ability to create a really healthy relationship, and I want to support you in that. And I would like to be a good model of how to be a both independent and dependent woman in the world. And I'm sorry that your father and I couldn't give you that example, but there are a lot of great examples. Let's look for some together. She could do that for herself now. Her mother is probably never going to say that to her. And that's fine. She can say that for herself. And she can say, I'm going to find some new good models, because that's what a good parent would do, is to say, if I can't provide this for you, let's find this together.
So that is how inner child work actually does go in therapy. I've done that. Is that you go back to whatever age, like, person you feel like you are struggling around this issue. And you always know. Like, when you're always like, I feel like this reminds me of when I was 8, or it reminds me of when I was 13, or whatever. You go back to that event and you get to say what you want or what needs to be said to your younger self that the messages you didn't get to receive at that time. You get to be the parent to yourself that maybe at that moment you really, really need. And it's so powerful, because what's funny is that your brain doesn't really know the difference between, like, your brain doesn't have any idea, like, what's a memory and what's happening right now, right? In your brain, it's all just information. So for you to actually go back and replay the scenario, rewrite the scenario, say what needs to be said in that moment to help you feel like it's okay to feel how I feel, or to feel like you don't have to take that on, or this isn't true about you. Really powerful, because it's like rewriting your memories, rewriting your blueprint.
Your neural pathways got created in one way, and you can go back and say, there are other options here, and especially now that we're an adult, let's choose an option that's going to benefit us moving forward. And it really is a powerful exercise. This is especially true when your inner child shows up in day-to-day life. There's going to be times when you feel like that scared child, and you're going to say, oh, this reminds me of back when I was feeling very uncomfortable in my chaotic household. Okay, well, this is a work meeting of fellow peer adults, and I'm an adult, and I can show up differently here than I did when I was a scared 7-year-old at home. So this is not just a give yourself an hour to sit and do this whole inner dialogue thing, which is a great exercise, but it's not always relevant in the moment. You might just be able to say, oh, okay, this is my scared 7-year-old showing up right now. I am not a 7-year-old anymore. This work situation is not my family.
Yeah.
So how am I going to choose to show up differently as an adult now because soothe that inner child part of me? Because right, nothing bad is going to happen here.
Right.
And I know that, whereas I didn't know that when I was 7.
Right.
So this can be an in the moment, real-time process, inner dialogue that you have when this shows up. Otherwise, you're letting your inner kid run the show, which is terrifying. If you let a 7-year-old go into a work meeting, that's not going to be super productive. It's going to be pure chaos. There's going to be temper tantrums.
You get the entire political structure of the United States of America.
Right? We could all use
you look around, look at the
work.
celebrities, look at the politicians, look at the leaders of countries. How many of them are just letting their inner child run the show? So many of them.
Yep.
So obvious, too. When you start seeing it, you see it everywhere. So, okay. As we're wrapping this up, I want to say that, again, this is, in my opinion, this is one of the core things that good therapy focuses on, is healing your inner child. I've had a lot of clients, so I've had both good and bad therapy experiences. I've had clients with similar, like, good and bad therapy experiences. Here's what I'm going to say is the difference between my good therapy experience and my bad therapy experience, and what a lot of other people can have agreed with me on, and I've seen be a pattern. Bad therapy often never talks about this. And it confounds me that there are therapists that will spend months, if not years, with the person and never talk about inner child wounds. It's insane. What they will so here's the thing. They will talk about it like in a sort of intellectually removed historical perspective. They'll be like, tell me more about that thing that happened when you were a kid. But there's often not sort of like, okay, now what do we do with it? In good therapy, you feel like you're doing something about it. You're given exercises, you're given visualizations, you're working through it, you're changing the paradigm, you're rewriting the script. So if you're thinking about working with a therapist, what I would say is ask them, do you do inner child work? And if they have no idea what you're talking about, my advice is to run the opposite direction, okay? Because good ones know what you're talking about, and they're trained in that way, and they're excited to work with you on that, and they understand that that is where the core of so many people's wounds are coming from. And they're not just going to talk about it, they're going to actually help you work through it and then move past it. Good therapy is not about just talking about the same thing without any movement or forward progression of any kind.
Right. I will say, though, that I have had some clients who will come to me and say, I know all my family stuff. Oh my gosh, I've done so much therapy. I get where all of these beliefs come from. I get that my parents were not modeling this for me or that for me. And I understand where the beliefs originated. And that has helped me a lot in changing my behavior. And there are still places that I'm getting stuck moving forward. At that point, that might be more of a coaching type relationship.
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what's going to be right in the moment.
But if you're like, I know I have these blocks and I'm sure I could figure out where they're coming from, but I'm having a hard time identifying it, or I'm having a hard time being empathetic for that scared part of me or that scared part of my parents, that would be a really good time to seek out good therapy.
As a coach and as someone who has done therapy, here's what I'm going to say is the difference between why I wanted to go to a therapist. After getting a lot of coaching. Mm-hmm. Right. So here's the difference for me, and I think this is applicable to a lot of other people. Therapy, there's often no external goal. Whereas in coaching, there is. So in coaching, people often come because they're like, I really don't like my job. I want to get out of it. I want to figure out what I want to do next. So there's a goal and you're working toward it. Now, you're working toward it not just in like pithy external ways. You're working toward it. Definitely, we're addressing a lot of this stuff and we're going deeper and we're questioning your beliefs and we're rewriting some of these scripts too. But in therapy, there often is not a goal other than to just go in and see what's there and just heal a bunch of stuff.
I would say healing is the goal.
So I felt like that's what I wanted. You know, I didn't want to work on an external goal. I just wanted to go in and heal any stuff that needed to be healed. Yeah. No context. I just wanted to heal.
Yeah, that's a really good description of a difference. And that might help you identify where you might be at right now in terms of what kind of support could help you the most now. And I think that changes over time. I think you can go to therapy and heal a bunch of stuff and then be ready to work toward this next phase of something and set a goal and figure out how to get there. And then more stuff might come up. You might need to go heal some more stuff. Yeah. It's cyclical.
It is. If you want more of a conversation around the difference between therapy versus coaching, we have a podcast episode about that from November of 2018. It's called Therapy versus Coaching with Sarah Ross-Miller, who is a therapist. So we are coaches. She's a therapist. We had a conversation with her about some of the differences and a lot of similarity you'll see.
Sure.
But that's a really good episode if you're interested in exploring the difference and, you know, the divide between these two things. But I think what we just said has got a lot of like the key kind of things to look out for and, you know, to help you make a decision if you want to work through this. And I have to say, you should want to work through this stuff because this is the stuff that you're going to keep hitting up against over and over again. Even us, even me, right? I'm a coach. I should be able to work through this on my own, right? Nope. I needed someone to help me work through my stuff because I can't see it.
And it impacts everything.
It really does.
So healing this is not just some frou-frou thing like, oh, I'm just gonna...
No, it's gonna make a difference
in
every area of your life.
This will impact everything.
Yeah.
So it's really worth it.
Okay, so we would really like to hear what you think about this. You can leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. You can leave a comment on our site in the episode description. If you're listening in the podcast, you can go to the episode description and you've got links there. And I want to know what you think about this. Like, what does this remind you? What does your thing remind you of? I want to know, because I think once you shine a light on it, that's really at least half of the work. It's just being aware, oh, my husband is not my dad, and I have been treating him like he's my father. That makes a lot of sense.
That alone can just completely revolutionize your relationship.
Yes. Okay. And then, last thing we'll say is to remind you that, again, that short course promotion, the Passion Profile short course, is going on until Tuesday, the 21st, so only a few days from now. And remember, literally, we're giving everyone a free call who decides to do the short course.
So you can sign up for the short course anytime. It's available 24/7.
Yeah.
But if you want the free call, you've got to sign up by Tuesday.
And remember, $50 off, too.
Yes.
With code MAY this month. M-A-Y. M-A. Yeah. Oh.
M-A-Y.
M-A. Like May. A. Yeah.
May's not a hard word to spell.
No, it's not. Apparently I can spell really well, but I can't do math very well, as we proved earlier in this episode. Okay, so
we hope we'll see some of you in the short course and get to talk to some of you one-on-one. And other than that, we will see you on Tuesday with a blog.
Okay. Oh wait, should we say one more thing? I'm sorry. I'm like taking it back. Well, I should say that the short course is short, as in it's like 5-ish hours. You can do it in as little as one day. So the impetus is that you don't have to take a lot of time to get clear on your direction.
Which is why...
Should have said that earlier.
Yeah, and which is why it's not going to be a hard thing for you to do before you talk to us. Because it's only about 5-ish hours of content. So you can absolutely do that within a matter of, you could be one day, or just give yourself a couple of weeks and then get to have that call.
Okay. Now we will see you on Tuesday.
Okay.
Bye.